never forget the facts.
Election campaigns are one
Australia deserves better.
big
Don't go back to Labor.
marketing exercise.
Once a GST's in place, you'll never, ever get rid of it.
The ALP would be a disaster.
Keep Australia moving.
Please tell us, Mr. Howard. We want to know.
In Australian politics, there was one marketing campaign that rewrote the rulebook. Let's go back to 1972, when Old Parliament House was just called Parliament House, and the Conservative coalition had been in power for 23 years. Labor was in the political wilderness, stuck on these, the opposition benches. The party was sick of losing, so Labor tried some new things. They hired this guy. Mick Young was in charge of getting Gough Whitlam elected.
He was my right-hand man.
He was full of wild new ideas.
1972, I still think of as the first truly modern campaign.
They centralised their campaign operations in a national head office. Instead of every state and territory coming up with their own strategy and slogans, there'd just be one slogan. And it just so happened to be the most famous Australian political slogan of all time.
Time for freedom, time for moving, it's time to begin, yes it's time, time for better days to be here, it's time to move, yes it's time.
It's time. Catchy, memorable, and short enough to fit on a bumper sticker.
1972 was in many ways the first of the great television elections.
No one in Australia had ever used marketing in politics like this before.
This is the first time that we see market research and TV advertising working together to identify the voters that we need to talk to and then talking to them with television advertising.
It worked. Boy, did it work. Under Whitlam, Labor won 67 of the 125 seats in the lower house and 49.6% of the national primary vote.
Mr. Whitlam has obviously won, and he's won a handsome victory.
It was a case of game recognised game for the Liberals. Their deputy leader called the It's Time campaign the brightest and most bouncy baby ever to be conceived and brought forth within the marriage of advertising and politics. And in the 1975 election, the Liberal Party birthed a bouncy baby jingle of their own.
Australia, you've been sleeping, brought down to your knees. We've lost a lot of living in the dark of these 3 years. We can look towards the future and the way things ought to be. Turn on the lights, Australia, it's up to you and me.
And it was lights out for Gough Whitlam and hello, Malcolm Fraser.
Parties learn from each other, they copy each other. Labor's doing direct mail, so we'd better get into direct mail ourselves. Labor's doing a jingle, we'd better have a jingle.
Turn on the lights, Australia, it's up to you and me.
The coalition in that election won 53% of the vote. More than half of Australians marked them as their first preference. This was the era of two-party domination. Labor and the coalition were the Coke and Pepsi, the Marvel and DC, the Holden and Ford of the political world. But that was then. Come 2013, things had changed.
The count is on, and I imagine a lot of you will be saying, thank God for that. Labor's primary vote threatens to collapse to its lowest level in post-war politics, possibly back to the 30s.
That came true.
That's the lowest Labor primary vote since the Second World War.
And since 2013, Labor's vote has never really improved. In fact, in 2022, we again saw Labor's vote
collapse to its lowest level in post-war politics, possibly back to the 30s.
Thanks, Kerry. It's not just Labor. Since 2013, the coalition's vote has headed downwards as well.
that stability that allowed both parties to get around 40% of the vote, that is just long gone.
The Labor and Liberal parties seem to have lost their marketing mojo. Voters don't know what they stand for, and they're just not capturing the national imagination.
Where's Albanese?
I think there's nowhere to be seen.
Once you've lost your swagger, it's very hard to get it back. I'm Casey Briggs, and this week we're asking, why have we swung away from the major parties? Whatever happened to party loyalty? If you're talking about loyalty, well, there aren't many things Australians are more loyal to than this. What's it take to be a loyal fan?
Basically, it starts in tears usually, where you care so much about the team that you actually just cry.
Call yourself a loyal Carlton supporter?
Yes, I mean, 57 years, but it's in your blood.
Well, I've been going for the Blues for about 30 years, since 1995, so we've been through dark times.
Dad was a big Blues fan. My granddad played for the VFL side, so growing up, big die-hard Blues fans, of course.
You know, you've got a choice. You can come with me every week and live in the house, or you move out. Simple as that. You're a Carlton fan, or you're not, or you're out.
1.3 million Aussies are members of AFL clubs, and that number's been growing. It absolutely dwarfs the number of members our political parties have. The Labor and Liberal parties combined have something like 100,000 members, and that's been falling. Politics just doesn't seem to stir up the same passions. It doesn't sound like it rouses the emotions that the footy does.
I don't think they've made me cry a lot. They've made me a little depressed sometimes.
Well, I don't trust any of them anymore, mate. I truly don't. I think they're all a bunch of lies. We never get what we're promised, do we? Let's face it.
And I wonder if there's anything else in your life you've stood by for 30 years.
Oh, the only other thing that's besides having a wife for well over a decade, probably faith. Faith is the other thing.
What about politicians?
Politicians, absolutely not.
That spells danger for the major parties because loyalty is what gives them stability. Once upon a time, you'd vote for a party out of loyalty, even if you didn't necessarily think they'd earned it.
That proliferation and I guess less coherence in terms of loyalties, political loyalties, is a reflection of what's happened to society.
It wasn't always that way. When the parties were formed, their mission was clear and the brands were easier to understand. Labor's origin story is relatively well known, formed from and as a political arm of the trade union movement.
Certainly people who identified as working class were more likely to vote for the Labor Party. People who were Catholic were more likely to vote for the Labor Party, at least up until that party split in the mid-1950s.
And so the party long had an identity around the working class.
We are and have always been the party of the Australian worker.
We are always looking for ways to make the tax system work better for working people.
If you had to identify a typical voter in, the 1950s, you're talking about a male blue-collar worker and his wife and maybe adult children. Well over half the paid workforce was in the union movement.
This was a very different world. Our class structures were clearer than they are now, and our attachment to institutions was stronger.
You're really looking at about probably 7 out of every 10 voters stuck to the same party election after election.
Turn on the lights, Australia!
For the Liberal Party, forming an identity has been much harder. First of all, they didn't form until about 50 years after the Labor Party. Before that, political parties in Australia chopped and changed. There was at various points a Protectionist Party, a Free Trade Party, an Anti-Socialist Party, a Nationalist Party, a United Australia Party. Parties forming, reforming, splintering until 1944, when the Liberal Party that we know today was founded.
So the Liberal Party doesn't have the advantage that the Labor Party have of emerging from an obvious social group. They really emerged as a response to communism. They were a large and disparate grouping of different advocacy groups of organisations who were all opposed to communism.
The communist pressure all around the world has been very, very cleverly designed. It's a very, very grave problem.
But a party built around the things you're not is a hard party to sell.
We want to develop and develop and develop the material resources of the country.
So the Liberals set about building up their brand.
One of Menzies' great strengths and achievements was building a Liberal Party constituency, one that made sense, that feels like, okay, we have this shared set of interests. And originally, you know, this is the forgotten people, but they were middle-class battlers, people who wanted to get ahead. They weren't working class, but they also weren't the top end of town. They were just a kind of photogenic suburban class of people.
The Liberals turned to the blockbuster media sensation of the time, a radio serial.
Then Winkle wakes up. A further broadcast in the intriguing and unusual series, John Henry Austral presents.
It ran over nearly 2 years with hundreds of episodes.
It cost hundreds of thousands of pounds, so the first thing to say is that it was an unusually expensive campaign.
This was perhaps one of the earliest examples of political sponcon, a Liberal Party advertorial.
It was based around this fellow, yes, a kind of influencer of his day, a fictional character obviously, John Henry Austral. And he had an upper class accent, might have been like a solicitor or a country doctor or a vicar, you know, talking to the people about what's gone wrong with Australia under the terrible socialists of Chifley.
There were many messages that now feel of their time, but some of it still feels relevant.
There was one very funny one about Rip Van Winkle, who went to sleep in the 1930s when prices were at one level, and when he woke up he was staggered to see how much prices in all of the shops had risen.
But surely those vegetables are wrongly marked. 1 and 6pence a pound for peas, 4 shillings for a cauliflower and 2 shillings for cabbage. I mean, the right price is 4pence for peas and no more than 6pence for cabbage or a cauliflower.
He was astonished that people weren't more alarmed. He said,
"What I can't understand is everybody's resignation. They accept this state of affairs. You can't have lower prices or anything else until you have increased production."
The call to action was, you've got to get rid of this government which is causing all of these price rises.
This programme was presented for your thought and consideration by the Liberal Party of Australia.
These radio plays dramatised and exemplified Menzies' own political philosophy, which was all about how the middle class and farmers and ordinary Australians, men and women, were getting squeezed by the dreadful socialists.
The Liberal Party won the 1949 election, and the election held in 1951, and 1954, 1955, 1958, 1961, 1963, 1966, and 1969. 9 elections in a row. Kind of unimaginable now.
So I think it was extremely important in entrenching for the Liberal Party both its sense of who it was governing for, but also its confidence in its capacity to conduct an election campaign.
At the end of the day, campaigns are selling a product, and we're the customers.
Not happy, Jan!
I'll slip an extra shrimp on the barbie for you. Matter of fact, I got it now.
Sick of Rex.
Brands, just like voters, evolve over time, and the best politicians are able to tap into how the electorate is changing and pitch themselves as the answer.
He has lost touch with the Australian battler.
John Howard managed it in 1996. He saw an electorate that was changing and pitched himself to it, recognising something very important in suburban areas, in Western Sydney in particular.
The vote amongst many blue-collar workers for Labor is very soft. They are very discontented with Labor.
One of John Howard's great successes was building this constituency around voters who would never previously have thought of voting Liberal, and to convince them that the Liberal Party is the one that represents their interests and not the interests of, business people, the sort of top end of town, was a remarkable feat of political rhetoric.
How could you say that the coalition represents batters? How could you possibly, with any honesty or any credibility, say that?
In the 1996 election, seats like Lindsay, Macarthur and Macquarie all turned blue, and they all stayed blue for Howard's entire time as PM.
And when you look at the swings in Western Sydney and in some of the traditional Labor areas of Sydney, it is a comprehensive endorsement of the philosophy and the approach of the Liberal Party. And to all of you,
John Howard also knew the power of the personal brand.
It's great to be out walking.
He's known for walking around Lake Burley Griffin when he was in Canberra, around Kirribilli when he was in Sydney, sometimes to the surprise of the local media and overseas cities. The journalists would sometimes walk with him for spontaneous sort of doorstop. And it was an opportunity to seem to the people of Australia to be relaxed and relatable and human, out for a morning walk, accessible.
Morning, Mr. Howard.
Good morning.
A question on the cricket to Zimbabwe, the tour to Zimbabwe.
He set a cracking pace as well. Would often be seen to be walking faster than anybody else, which was a little exhausting to look at.
The green and gold trackies became so important to the Howard brand, they're now in the collection of the Museum of Australian Democracy in Canberra.
We think it was given to him in about 2004 by Australian Rugby Union, now Rugby Australia. We know that John Howard was a rugby tragic, and like all politicians, I suppose, he loved to appear to be relatable to the people.
Good morning, Mr. Prime Minister.
It helped make him step away, I suppose, from his role as a Prime Minister, which seems distant and besuited, to someone you could just go up to and have a chat with.
this is the complication at the checkout you never expected.
Indeed, I didn't.
Nice to see you. How are you?
Now it's really important that people knew that the leader had done their time with us, the rest of us, being a normal person.
Howard won over and held those swing voters for a long time. Not forever, mind you. His downfall came at the hands of another marketing miracle.
My name's Kevin, I'm from Queensland, I'm here to help.
People left the Liberal Party, they voted for Kevin Rudd, and they didn't necessarily come back to the Liberal Party.
Tony Mitchelmore worked on Rudd's campaign.
Essentially it came down to two words. It was future past. Labor tried to be quite respectful in that campaign of John Howard, but he was the man of the past. Kevin Rudd was a younger guy, and he was the guy of the future.
Those high levels of expectations in a leader, they're not always a great thing.
If you're building your entire strategy around a leader, that means when the leader brands start to go down, so did you.
Thank you. Can I confirm I will be a candidate in tomorrow's ballot?
That was market driven. It had so little to do with policy. It was more about who can we win the next election with? Oh, I can't win it with you? Well, you're gone. I'll get someone else in. Can't win it with you either? You're gone.
I met with the Prime Minister and advised him that I would be challenging him for the leadership of the Liberal Party.
That famous quote by both Malcolm Turnbull and Tony Abbott.
We have lost 30 news polls in a row. It is clear that the people have made up their mind about Mr. Abbott's leadership.
Really exposed that strategy in the parties and how parties were thinking about how they need to be more market focused and more market driven.
This is my leader.
There you go.
And I'm ambitious for him.
Yeah, good on you. Thanks, ScoMo.
It's one of the biggest lies when you hear a politician go, the only poll which really matters is the one on the day. That's not true.
I actually think My profession, as much as I love it, has a bit of a role to play in all of this, the inability for leaders to kind of weather these storms, because once upon a time it was really difficult and expensive to do a poll of the community about how they felt about something that you just said in Parliament yesterday. But we can do a pretty good, robust national poll about an issue around in about 3 or 4 days, and suddenly it can be on the front page of the newspaper and everybody's saying this is a terrible idea. Of course they think it's a terrible idea. They've just heard the idea. They've just heard about it. It's a really difficult environment to make good policy in.
There's another shadow looming over this entire conversation. The fact that, unlike most countries, all of us, under threat of fine, turn up to vote.
Compulsory voting is so unequivocally a good thing. That's not to say that it doesn't have rough edges.
About 69% of us support compulsory voting, according to the latest Australian election study. But when you're designing an electoral system, every choice you make has consequences, and it's good to understand them. It means more people are engaged in the democratic process.
It's also made our parties quite lazy, made them pretty risk averse in terms of what they talk about during an election campaign. So they don't have to get us excited about turning up to vote.
I think if we didn't have compulsory voting, we'd get more policy, because then you get the people who care about it out and voting for it or against it.
As the parties have shifted to appeal to new groups, it's become harder for them to keep everyone in the tent.
Howard's battlers, Chinese tradies, Scott Morrison's quiet Australians.
If an alien came to Earth today and said, who is this Liberal Party and who do they stand for? It's really difficult to say, and likewise on Labor.
That brand confusion has created a gap in the market that new players have taken advantage of. 6 of the wealthiest electorates in the country, Liberal Party heartland, fell to independents.
The Liberal Party is unlikely to feel entitled to this seat again, and will have to sit up on this.
They took advantage of an unpopular government, a lot of donations, and some very clever branding.
This is a win for moderates with a heart.
The teal was an inspiration really driven by her electorate. It faced the ocean, Manly Beach, all the way up to freshwater now, and it was full of people who went surfing and enjoyed the ocean. So it was kind of not blue, not green, but we're somewhere in between.
Dolph Dickinson's agency is working on 3 campaigns this year, including that of Wentworth MP Allegra Spender and Ellie Smith, who's running in Peter Dutton's seat of Dixon. Do you agonise over the colour? Is it the single hardest decision?
Yes, there is definitely a lot of debate that goes into the colour, and also just having that nice balance that it doesn't look jarring, it feels welcoming, and again, reflective of the candidate.
It's a slick operation, using many of the same tactics as the major parties.
Demographics in that area, broken down by age and gender.
I would say that we do better than them. I would say that when we entered the field and looked at the campaigns, we thought they were easy beats. They are not able to be as agile or nimble in their marketing as we are.
Because I'm free to represent you, not a political party.
It's really hard for parties, particularly who are big organisations built on 100 years of history, to be versatile, to move around. And on the one hand, they have to, because they want to get elected, and if they're not trying to get elected, then what is the purpose of political parties at all? But if they do move around too much, voters just get annoyed. And I think that's probably where we're at the moment.
The reality of winning seats now is you got to keep your loyal voters on side to keep your primary vote high enough, and appeal to other voters enough that they'd toss a second preference your way.
These political parties are putting messages out where people might go, hang on, I don't agree with that. Why are you doing that for? But what they're trying to do is create some sort of resonance or connection to that secondary market, that secondary base that are required to win the seat. And so sometimes the core is then going, hang on, what are you guys talking about? And now all of a sudden you're saying you might agree partly with the other side as well. I don't understand what you stand for anymore. I'm confused. And that's leading to de-identification.
It's just really difficult to be a political party in this era. You are pulling together minimum winning coalitions of voters that don't make ideological sense.
As a campaigner, if you think there's some sort of
holy grail, it's time campaign that can reverse that impermanence, and it's just like a self-belief thing, I think you're kidding yourself.
No jingle can do it.
No jingle can do it, unfortunately.
Political parties are not sporting teams, and we don't really want them to be.
I'm not sure if loyalty should be the sort of absolute value we're looking for in a voter. I think it's dangerous to kind of use that sort of, that frame, like it's a football team or a religion or something like that.
But there are probably some things that parties can learn from footy clubs. Footy clubs know you've got to keep talking to your supporters year round, not just when you're campaigning for the flag.
Yeah, sticking by them through thick and thin.
You've got to stick by, you got to stick by your team. You've got to go every week.
They speak to those fans authentically. They build deep relationships with their local community in a way that major parties have been struggling to replicate.
Do pollies deserve any loyalty?
No, they've got to earn it, and they haven't really, I don't think, for decades.
They're fighting an uphill battle, a battle they've been struggling with.
So it's easy to blame the parties for not being the parties that they used to be. You know, they've changed, why have you changed, man? But really, they're doing what is completely rational, and by trying to chase those final votes that get you over the milestone of that majority in the House of Reps, of a majority of votes in a majority of electorates.
Democracy works because voters punish failure and reward success. Rationality is the thing that we want.
A brand needs to move and change. So all the successful brands in the world, you'll see they're constantly evolving.
When we have less attachment to political brands, when we're willing to shop around more, we, as an electorate, swing more.
I think about the John Howard years.
The government that I will lead will be a government not only for the people who voted for us, but also for the people who voted against us.
And I look back at that as just this extraordinarily calm and predictable time in politics. And now looking back to that, it's like, that was the blockbuster video of politics. Like that, we will never ever, I don't think we'll ever have that time again.
It's a tricky position to be in. Evolving your brand, moving with the times, finding new customers, without annoying the people that like the old recipe.
But when the shift does happen, it's not going to be an earth-shattering moment. It's going to be a quiet change in leader, or it's going to be the behind-the-scenes ascension of a particular group of cabinet ministers or of backbenchers who are jostling for supremacy in the party. You know, the revolution in the parties is going to be very boring.
We don't swing like a metronome between Labor and the coalition anymore.
You know, people are choosing niche brands. You know, the Liberal and Labor Party are a bit like department stores, which are increasingly becoming less relevant in people's lives. People might go to the discount warehouse of Jackie Lambie or to the upmarket boutique of the Teals, and people are increasingly going to those niche brands.
We've now seen the combined minor party and independent vote climb to levels we haven't seen since before the Liberal Party even existed.
The data very, very clearly tells us we are in the zone where tectonic plates in Australian politics shift. That minor party vote, it's not going anywhere. It'll peak and trough over the next couple of elections, but it's inexorably going up. And once you get it above that 25% level, certainly above 30%, you are going to see major fundamental shifts in the way that Australian politics arranges and organises itself, and I'm sure that'll play out over the next few federal elections.
When tectonic plates shift, we get earthquakes. Is that what we should brace for?
I think you have to be prepared for significant change. The brands might stay the same, but exactly who they represent may change significantly, and we will see more political innovation. It's unavoidable.
This is a pivotal election that will shape our future.
Building Australia's future together.
Next time, what happens next? Independents and minor parties broke through in a big way last election. How's that changing politics, and how will the next parliament work? That's next time on Swingers.